one who's professional enough to call it a media kit.
You know why? It's because Terry Lovelace said, you have to have a media kit now and blah, blah, blah. I mean, he really helped me a lot because I had no idea what to do and he had already done it. So he could, advise me.
Yeah. Yeah, he was, I love that conversation. And I think that conversation too spoke to sort of a lot of people's interest in this subject because that's the one that still like performs. Like if you look at all the interviews I've done since we started the podcast,
Uh-huh.
his is the one that just continues to perform really, really, really well.
Wow. Why do
And
you think that is?
I just think people have, even if they're not like outspoken about it, I think a lot of people recognize that this is a really vital subject. Like we have to understand what is going on. And
Right.
the best way I think to doing that is just to hear what people have to say. People like you, people like Terry, because we have no reason. Like my policy on this is I have no reason in the world to doubt Terry or
Right.
anyone else. And if I can be somebody who is here to listen to what people have experienced, that to me is doing a service to everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I wrote the book, is because I didn't, it's a scary subject and people are scared to death. I mean, it's not a good thing. And then, with the media pushing everything under the rug and pretending like it doesn't exist and those people are just crazy, it's so unfair, you know?
Yeah, I have. So I'm in New York City, so like the media is largely centralized here, and I know so many of the people that work in the media. I know people at CNN, Fox News, all these places, and I understand like the workings of those environments and how it is that they sort of get to this point where they just don't tell that story, you know, and just the politics of it and the bullying that goes on there. And it's not going to be them. It's going to be independent people like podcasters and independently published authors. These are the people that are going to be responsible for disclosure. Pentagon isn't going to come out of the woodwork and be like, yeah, well, here's what's really going on in Nevada. Like that'll never happen. Even if it was ordered at the executive level, they'll find a way not to let it happen.
Yeah, I
But
agree. Yeah, I was telling Terry, he said, how do you think we'll get disclosure? And I said, I think it's us.
yeah, I agree with that 100%. So in your book, you talk about how in 2017 you discovered that you were sort of part of this abduction program. What was your life like before 2017? What were you doing professionally? What were you doing in your personal time?
I was in IT and so let me fix my phone on do not disturb. And I worked in the DoD and I lived in California. So I lived in California for about 30 years. And we, you know, I worked at Lockheed Martin for a little bit as a contractor, and I worked for this little company called Vista Research. And and my husband is a wireless networking expert, and he worked at Cisco, and it was just a regular life. There was just nothing special about it. I had moved around a lot as a kid, and and I lived in Turkey and the Philippines and a couple of other places because of my dad's work. He actually was a mechanical engineer who built copper smelters and gold leaching plants. But because I didn't know what he did and I couldn't say that when I was a little girl, everyone thought he worked for the CIA. So, But I did move around a lot, and I ended up in California, and then I met my husband, and then we decided to retire and get out of there. They were going to build the 49ers stadium a mile from our house where we lived in Santa Clara, near in Silicon Valley. But yeah, my life was completely, boring. There was nothing going on there. I mean, occasionally I would have, strange things that I couldn't explain, and I wrote about some of those in my book. And there were things where I would think to myself, I wonder what that was, but I wouldn't, really know what it was. I mean, I'd have an occasional dream that would be, what do you call it? Prophetic, or I just have strange things happening, but I couldn't say what this is. Is this that I'm psychic? I mean, there was no label for it, and there's just no labeling. So I just, would put it in the back of my mind and continue on. I'd been married before, and there were weird things that happened in that marriage, not with him, but, things that would happen where I'd wake up screaming at night. And, I tried to figure out what these things were, but I just didn't know what they were. So.
What year did you retire?
I retired in 2009.
2000. Oh, okay, so you were retired well before 2017.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to disclose what contract work you did for Lockheed?
It was just, they would contract me for a specific job, and then they would have 2 months worth of work, and then I would be there 6 months. And it was just, to me, it was hard because I like to be busy, and I was not busy. Sometimes if I asked for other work, they would send me on wild goose chases. And I didn't, we have never been able to figure this out. Can you work on it? Kind of thing. And so, but it wasn't anything especially interesting. I mean, I think the most interesting thing about Lockheed Martin was I was working in the Fleet Ballistic Missiles area, and the hallways were so long you couldn't see the end of them. And I would have to find my way to the bathroom, and then hope I can walk with someone to the cafeteria.
Well, I find that interesting though, that you were working there, because so many of the people that have come out and spoken about this seem to have an affiliation in one way or another with the Air Force, even if it's their parents or grandparents who were in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
And that's the most common thread that I've found. And Lockheed Martin's one of the biggest Air Force contractors.
Wow. That's a really interesting point. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's why I started with it.
It's funny because when I wrote my book, I hadn't really had a lot of experiences with other people having this issue. And now that I have, there's so many commonalities I didn't realize were common, I just thought this was happening to me in a certain way, but I didn't realize that there were so many things that went along with other people. We were all having the same experience.
Well, that's sort of like why I love reading people's personal experiences about this, is because a lot of the times they start writing their book I don't know why you started writing your book, but a lot of people seem to start writing it as a form of therapy, not realizing that there's so much interconnectivity.
Yes. Yeah. I think I believe it and you would know because you've interviewed a lot of people, but as I read other people's accounts, I can see that too. And it's kind of weird, but because on its face, our experiences seem so different. I mean, that there are no commonalities and nobody can put the pattern together.
Well, that's sort of like what I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with the detective work in this regard. Okay. So, and I think it helps too that like, I'm really I consider myself very distanced from it. And I think that benefits me to a certain extent because there's no emotional investment.
Mm-hmm.
But one question I have before we get into the actual content of your book is, do you have a recollection of any experiences growing up as a child, as a teenager?
Yes, I had one, after I was 10 and I kept having that weird daydream that I couldn't get rid of. And it was actually a very mundane thing. When I was 10, I kept having this recurring daydream while I was living in Turkey that I would see my maid, our maid, because when we lived there, that's what something you needed, was a maid, because I lived there in the 70s, would be walking up the hill and I would talk to her. And every night, that same daydream, I would have it. And I couldn't get rid of it. It was like a loop. And so then it actually happened. So when I was 16, I was getting ready to go into my senior year of high school. And my dad, I started having a daydream at night again, that I was going to move to a foreign country. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. That's my like greatest fear, that right before my senior year of high school, I moved somewhere. And that it kept persisting because I thought it was because a friend in high school had moved to South Africa. And she also had, and I thought, oh, that's just me, ruminating on the fact that this woman is moving to a foreign country. But no, I moved to a foreign country. I moved to the Philippines my senior year of high school. So that happened. And I did have a few other dreams that would come true. So, but again, and I would have extremely vivid dreams. So, and I wouldn't know what they meant.
Do you feel like you've always been able to differentiate between like, and I'm only asking this because this seems to be a common idea with a lot of the discussions I've had, where some dreams they just feel like regular dreams, and then there are dreams that stand out and they feel a lot different and more visceral.
Yes. I had this one dream when I was a teenager. It was the scariest dream I've ever had. And I've never had one like it, but it showed a scene of like the California landscape of the brown grass and the little trees. And and it was like you were looking at kind of like at a windshield. And I hear laughter, and then, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And screaming bloody murder. And at that time, one of the Hillside Strangler or, different murderers or serial killers were around. And, that scared me because I didn't know if I really saw something and I didn't know where that was. It was sort of like, yeah, is this information you're giving me? Because there is nothing I can do with this. I don't know what this is. I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's true, so that was a really, really scary dream. And the rest were, nothing was ever like that.
So what happened in 2017?
In 2017, I was meditating, and I was feeling like a negative presence in my room. And I asked my spirit guide that I was talking to, what is that negative presence? And he said, it's the ETs. They're here to come. They've come to take you. And he also said, they have taken all of your eggs, and that's why you don't have children. And it was interesting because in the past, I'd wondered, why I never had the ticking clock, but I didn't think it was because I didn't have eggs. But and that pushed me forward to, find out what was happening, how it was happening, and what to do about it.
You've always been a meditator?
No, I haven't. For whatever reason, I got into meditation when I moved to Arizona. I moved to Arizona in 2011, and that seemed to be a thing I would do. I also never wrote in a journal, but all of a sudden I never felt like I had anything to say. But now when I moved to Arizona, I started writing everything down, which I thought was strange and unusual, but knowing what I know now, I wonder if, that was just like a mechanism for healing.
Yeah. Well, let's open this book up here. You talk about your spirit guide. How did you how do you find your way to being able to communicate with your spirit guide? Like, how did you find this individual is around? Are you able to sort of unpack the history of that?
Sure.
Rather than, because we're like introducing a character out of the blue all of a sudden,
Right,
you know?
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so when I first moved here, like I said, I started getting into meditation. I also started like I heard something while I was watching TV. I was watching American Idol, and I was singing to myself, "I wish I could sing." And I heard a voice say, "Well, be grateful for the gifts you have. You already have." And, I thought to myself, what? I don't know that I have any gifts, and I'm like, what gifts? So that was my first foray. Then I felt like I was getting messages from my grandmother and my different people in my family, and I didn't know what to do. So I continued meditating. I tried to connect to other groups like on Facebook that would give me help on figuring out what this is, because I didn't know what it was. And I didn't think I had any gifts. That was another thing. So I, flailed around a little, looked, read books, did this, did that, tried to connect with mentors. And, if you're trying to figure out what's going on with you, where do you go? Who helps you? So one of the things I did was I started looking around for a mentor for mediumship or stuff like that. And I found a woman, 4 years later, a woman who was doing, giant meditation groups. And also she taught people how to be a medium. And, and when I met her, she said, "Oh, you're just like me. You're a medium." So, I didn't quite believe it, but it's like, okay, she thinks I'm a medium and she's a medium. So I have to believe it, because why else would she say that? So I started going to her meetup, or not meetups, but she had a office where we would meet up with her meditation group. Meditation in a group is pretty powerful. And so that's how it all started. So she was telling me we need to contact our spirit guide. Let's find out what their names are. So she put me through that. And then that's how I said, "Oh, guess what? I can hear someone talking. His name is Koreg." And she told me what to do. And so I did it. And there you go. That's what happened.
Koreg. Is Koreg still around?
No, he isn't. So that's the weird
Interesting.
thing.
So I'm going to skip around the chapters because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that you talk a lot about your story on other podcasts, which I'm also going to link to, because I think a lot of the conversations I heard were really good conversations. So we don't need to like tackle the same area in the same way. But in chapter 9, you're talking about beware of remote viewers, and you're the only person I found that has unpacked sort of what it feels like when certain different types of remote viewers are finding you. So you describe a thunk, like the thunking of a watermelon, for when a human finds you, or you describe the sound of a crack or the feeling of a crack when an ET has found you through remote viewing, or a snap, which you call invisible beings. Can you describe further sort of this idea and kind of how you learned all this, I guess?
Well, I learned it all through trial and error, but initially because I had this strange experience when I was trying to learn how to remote view. I had a situation where I was sitting I was sitting right here actually. And I was trying to do the remote view, and all of a sudden I felt like I was transported to another room. And I wasn't in my room, and there was men standing around me, drinking coffee, like in styrofoam cups. They were wearing business attire, like khaki pants and white shirts. And I was in a place, I was in front of a computer, but the computer monitor was a CRT. So I didn't think I knew I wasn't in my room, in my own room. And suddenly I was there. So when that happened, I heard somebody say, "Oh, there you are." And I thought, oh my gosh, where am I? And then that's when I started having all of these cracking, thunking, and snapping noises at various times. And I associated with remote viewers. But it turns out that they are remote viewers, but they're also, some of them are shapeshifters. And so that's part of the problem. You can't really see them, you can hear them. And so what happens is, you're in this situation where things are happening to you. You can't stop it. You don't know what it is. You don't know who they are. And, and it just went from there. And I would say that after having the remote viewer experience, my life has gotten a lot worse. So, but when I talked to, I took a couple of other classes, one with Lynn Buchanan. He told me that that is not a remote viewer. So I don't really know, what those were. But I do think some of them are remote viewers, because there is a noise when you hit the membrane of wherever you're going. It creates a noise or a resistance with your body when you do extended remote viewing. So I took controlled remote viewing, which is using coordinates, and extended remote viewing, where you listen to music, you get into a meditative state, and then you go somewhere in your mind. And I guess people are going places. I've heard of another remote viewer named Tim Rafat, and he does Russian remote viewing, and it's a totally different thing. So there are tons of remote viewers and tons of remote viewing. But if you have remote viewers in your house, yeah, it's not a good situation, because most remote viewers are not trying to remote view people and harass them. They are just, looking at, Mars and, other things. They're not interested in an individual.
So what does that mean for you if they're interested in you?
I don't know. It's not good. In my book, I tell you all these things. What they've done to me is they've turned everything against me. So my tools don't work for me anymore. Nothing works. If I like music, they play music in my head all the time, somehow. So I don't know if that's mind control. I'm not really sure. But the situation is extremely dire. There's just, your whole life is turned upside down. So I don't know if it was ET remote viewers or reptilians that were, harassing me. It's because I wrote a book about it. I'm not sure. It's just.
They still do it even after you publish this book?
Yes. Actually, it got even worse.
Oh, wow. What was the latest circumstance? When did this last happen?
Let me think. Well, when I take Krav Maga, and when I'm there, they're there. Oh, okay. And they're trying to interfere with my thinking, and trying to keep me from not, of my mind wandering, so that I'm not listening to my teacher and that kind of thing. So that's one of the things.
They sound like assholes.
They are. They are. Actually,
I'm just going to say it.
Arrogant assholes when I'm thinking about them.
Yeah. So you talk about time bending in terms of describing sort of what it feels like when they take you and then return you. And Is this the same or is it different than when people describe missing time?
I think, I don't know, because, I think when you feel like you're gone somewhere, there's just a feeling of a void. And that's how it is for me. So I've talked to other people and they just remember intense amount of fear and then nothing. So I think it's the same, but everybody describes their experiences differently, right? And to describe a feeling that, I mean, if it's hard enough to label a situation when you're a little kid, it's sort of similar. You don't have the words. And I actually made up that word time bending because I didn't have a word that would describe what was actually happening to me. Because it feels like, you're just not there. You were there and you felt like you were like in your car, and then you felt like you weren't in your car. Where did you go? You don't know. So in that way, it's extremely hard to describe. So I think it could be, but when it happens to me, I don't always look at the time now if I'm in my car. But I have recently done an experiment where I'm joined a UFO group called Zero, and everyone in there is abductees. And we started, doing experiments to see if we could figure things out. Now, I wore my watch to bed one time, and I found out that my watch said it was 2 a.m., but all of the clocks in my entire house said it was 2:03. Does that mean there was missing time? Could all of those clocks be wrong? While my watch, which is just a regular watch, not an Apple Watch, said another time? I mean, those are mysterious things. Is it, I don't know. We just don't know. So if you do investigations like that, there's no answers. You're trying to figure out what's happening, but how can you? You only have so much information. I mean, are you going to synchronize all your clocks and then, keep a watch of it? And one of the things that happens, and it happens to me too, is if I get something to work once, I can't get it to work a second time. So it's as if the ETs know that I'm going to do that. So I can catch them off guard once, but then afterwards I can never catch them off guard again. Because if they see that I'm wearing my watch, they know I'm trying to catch them for evidence in the time, right? So it's really difficult. And the evidence thing is makes everything extremely difficult because we can't get a continuation. I mean, unless we can get everybody doing the same thing, we can't get a continuation of experiments.
Yeah, well, that's the thing I talked to Colin Kelleher about. Do you know who he is?
No.
He was the guy who was basically running operations for Skinwalker Ranch back in the late 90s.
Okay.
Or early 2000s. And they had the hardest time repeating some of the activity that they were logging. And the thing with the scientific method is you need repeating data.
Exactly.
And so one of the questions I asked him was, does the scientific method coincide with, like, is it good enough to investigate the paranormal? And I honestly don't know that it is.
It's impossible. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing that people don't understand is evidence is key, and they don't want you to have it. So they will do anything. When I've taken photos, and my phone and my computer are both compromised by someone. And, if I get any evidence, what they do is, since they're on my phone, they just blur the photo or they delete it. So, I've started taking to printing them, but even if I print them and put them in my safe, they can access my phone in my safe. Even if it's turned off, on airplane mode, turned off, and in a Faraday bag, they can access my phone in my safe. So are they doing it remotely? I mean, so there's a lot of, so if they'll go into a safe and take out your printed picture for your evidence, Who is this and why are they doing it?
Yeah. Well, I have theories about the how, but it's all just theoretical physics for the most part, and the way SSD drives store data. But I'm not going to unpack that because we just don't have time for the
So do
intro
you think it's
lesson.
remote? Well, okay, just make it smaller. And is it a remote? Are they accessing your phone remotely? Are they
Well,
accessing the
that's kind of a
place?
loaded concept because we're thinking in terms of signals.
Right.
Whereas if we were to look at it from a quantum mechanics standpoint, it's much more possible, and
Okay.
what would be possible, I guess. But I'll try to think of a more concise way to explain what I'm thinking, and I'll email it to you, and then
Okay.
maybe we can do another episode down the road about it.
Okay.
Because I would like to consult with a computer technician to make sure that what I'm thinking is actually on point.
Okay.
So, have you ever heard the idea that people who encounter I call them the others. It's just a nice broad stroke term for whoever these people are. Um, that you have 20 seconds to realize what's going on and to get out. There's like a 20-second thing where whatever you feel in that first 20 seconds is the right feeling. And after 20 seconds, they've manipulated your feelings. And it's something I've been seeing again and again with some of the books that I've been reading, where if you feel fear in the first 20 seconds, that is the right feeling and you should get out.
Right.
Because after that, they can turn it around on you and make you feel the false feeling of joy.
Right. Yes, I actually agree. And actually, one of the things that's happened to me after writing the book and just being in this situation is that I actually feel like they control all of my emotions, but it's only the negative ones. I actually don't have any positive emotions anymore. If I feel fear, it's them. If I feel sadness, it's them. If I feel despair, hopelessness, like I'm never going to get out of this situation, it's them. It's never me. And, at first I didn't realize that because why would you think that your feelings are not your own? But whoever this is, they completely manipulate them. And they want, I think they're feeding off the fear, like narcissists. And that's what I put in my book. Um, but they want you to feel those negative feelings. They benefit from them in some way. And so, yeah, I don't know if I actually feel what I'm supposed to anymore because of what they've done to my feelings. Um, and they also mess with your body just in general. They gave me malnutrition, and I know Terry had that too. Um, so, you don't know what's going on in your entire body. Then, if your feelings are messed up, what about your subconscious? All this stuff. And it's pretty negative on its face. But yeah, I actually had a panic attack, and I don't have panic attacks last night, and I know it was them. So they wanted me to wake up, which they can wake us up. If they can knock us out, they can wake us up. And then I realized, oh, this isn't me. And I even said, that's not me. And then I had to calm myself down because you have the whole racing heart, you have everything that they want you to feel.
So you had a panic attack just last night.
Yes.
Jeez. So so yeah, because one of the questions I had was about fear because you have a chapter dedicated to it, and that's one of the things that crossed my mind when I was reading the Mojave incident. I don't know if you read that one by Ron Felber. I had him on the podcast last season,
What's
and
it called?
the Mojave incident,
Okay.
and it seemed to me that the incident that he was describing, it was really just, as we call them in this podcast now, the assholes. It was
Yeah.
just the assholes just delighting in the fear that they were inflicting. And that's all it felt like. It was just about fear and learning about fear and experiencing fear. And I was thinking during that conversation, what if, and this is just me just hypothesizing, what if they don't understand fear? Or what if maybe fear is the thing that makes us as a species the biggest threat to them, like this kind of thing. Because I do think that it all comes down to fear in some way or another. And you had an interesting statement about how fear is a great mechanism for control.
Yes, I think if you can control people's emotions, right? How much control do you have over them? All of it. And if they're fearful, if they're depressed, I mean, what can you do with that? You know? So yeah, I think fear is, I mean, one of the things that I thought later was that I was so glad I didn't have children, because imagine I had children, I could be also emotionally manipulated by using those children against me. It's bad enough, they say, oh yeah, your husband's going to have back surgery. Okay, we're going to kill him. And so, to be able to say, and I did say this in my book and to Bob, it's like, that's emotional blackmail. And I'm not doing it. So when they told me, we're going to kill your husband when he's in his surgery, I said, okay, now Bob's still here for everyone listening. But I was just like, no, I'm not going to be emotionally blackmailed because of something you're getting out of it. I don't know what it is, but I don't, that's his journey. This is my journey, but I'm not going to be emotionally blackmailed. So I think that there's a lot of negativity that can be wrung out of emotionally blackmailing people by saying you're going to hurt their animals, their kids, their grandparents, whoever. It's just a way of control.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about programming? I think this is interesting because one of the most horrifying aspects of this whole phenomenon is it seems like free will can be switched on and off at any given moment. And that's terrifying to me because I'm obsessed with the concept of free will. Whenever I'm writing a science fiction story in any kind of way, you can always boil it down to, what is free will a thing?
Right. I think since they can control your emotions, and if they're programming your mind, whether by physically programming it, by, lifting, putting something underneath your scalp. I have found that I have indentations in my scalp, like as if there's been holes drilled into my skull. And also, and this is interesting, I found that I have something underneath my scalp that feels like a TENS unit, Have you ever had that electricity like on a muscle and they're trying to stimulate it? It feels like, and sometimes it feels like electric worms. Well, I have something like that underneath my scalp, and my husband does too. So he is, he's in the same boat as I am. He just doesn't know it. And so one night it was going off, and I could feel it moving underneath there. And I said, "Oh my gosh, the worms under my scalp are going off." And I said, "Sometimes it feels like that." And he said, "I feel that too." So he has it, So with programming, they're programming your thoughts, they're programming your feelings. I mean, they have complete control of you. And so, do you have free will? If someone else is in control of your mind, I don't think so. I don't think you have free will. And I actually had a dream or a remote view of there are no choices. And I think there is a choice, but it's probably not one you're going to like. So I don't think we have as much control as we think we do. And our only, thing that will help us move on is not letting our emotions carry us away. But yeah, there is other programming. In my book, I wrote about programming on TV and how they are, constantly programming you to buy things and to, the whole wedding industry. The dress is the most important thing. I mean, Cinderella, you hear that all the time, right? So everybody wants to be the princess. And is that programming? Is that just marketing? Is marketing programming? I mean, I don't know. It's just that with the ETs especially, I think that they have complete control of you, and they have programmed your mind in the way they want it to be. so that what benefits them most. And so that's what I think.
So you call them narcissists. I love that. Because I do think narcissists are the most dangerous kind of people.
Yes.
Why do you call them that?
I call them that because of all of the similarities they have. The ETs do with narcissists. Narcissists don't only care about themselves. They have their own agenda. They, their goal is actually to make your life miserable and chaotic. It's not in any way to help you. And I had a sister that was one. My parents had narcissistic tendencies, and it's confusing. Their job is to confuse you and make sure you never know what's going on. And doesn't that sound like the ET? And then they bully you. They're bullies. They punish you by, harming you. And then, the ultimate betrayal is they erase your memory. You have no memory of what really happened. You just have bruises. And to me, the whole thing is extremely narcissistic. And I think a lot of the people that are being abducted are the nice people. I mean, seriously, why would they want to wring some emotion out of a turnip of a narcissist that's like them, right? So I think they just want to, make our lives miserable. So, and that's what narcissists do. They're just, this is all about me, and it's also all about money. So with a narcissist, it's all about money. Now, I don't know what the ETs, if some of them want you to throw money around, like the reptilians trying to find a solution to your problem. That's a possibility. And so I think a lot of people do. I mean, I read books all the time. I'm constantly trying to figure out what's going on. And so I think, and they're also all about control. Control is their agenda. And so that's why I made the comparison that narcissists and ETs are the same.
So one of the things about your book that I really like, because it's the polar opposite of my pet peeve with the whole thing, is there's a lot of people who talk about their time with these others as spiritual awakenings, and they sort of talk about it glowingly. I appreciate that your book is Abducted and Furious, and it's all about fighting back. Can we unpack sort of some of the things that you've discovered in terms of how you fight back against these assaults?
Yes. One of the things was I actually I found some, when this is happening to you and you're so afraid, at first you do the normal things, right? And you try to catch them in the act and all that, and it never works. I mean, people always wonder, why don't they have evidence? It's because we can't get it. And we try really, really hard. And so then I just started searching around. I ended up taking some healing classes, and which I didn't think would be I just thought, what the heck, might as well try it. And that's how I see everything. It's like, well, I have nothing to lose, might as well try it. So I ended up reading some books by Stuart Swerdlow, and he wrote some very interesting healing books. And so I found some tools in there for negating negativity in your life. And there's a tool called the cancellation tool. And it's basically, I now brown X out all unnecessary negativity in my life. I now brown X out blank, according to the wishes of my oversoul and God mind. So you say this to yourself and to negate your negativity. And so I just started trying to use it, trying different things. I thought the book said, you need to use protection. So there's a protection tool in there. And then I just started doing basically trial and error for everything. And I just did it all the time. I thought about it all the time. And so I also used a tool to find out what was happening behind the scenes, so to speak, in my subconscious, called the green spiral staircase. And basically, it's sort of like a self-hypnosis tool. I mean, I didn't realize that when I was writing the book because I hadn't had regression therapy, hypnotic regression. Since the ETs use mind control and hypnosis and give you hypnotic suggestion, I didn't want to, for a while, investigate that. But when I did, I realized a spiral staircase is a similar thing that they use. So with the green spiral staircase, when you have a dream and you're stressed or you don't know what these dreams mean, you can use this green spiral staircase to look back in your own mind and see it and see what's really happening. Because when I read Whitley Strieber's book Communion, I realized that the screen memory is something that our mind creates. It's not the ETs. And that was a huge revelation for me, because how can you figure out what's going on if an ET gave you and put something in your mind? So once I realized that, I thought, hey, I can find out what's happening behind that. So that's what the green spiral staircase does. And it allows you to look behind the scenes of the screen memory so that you can see what was really happening. And then you can use your cancellation tool on those elements. And it does really work. I've gone on other podcasts and they all say that it does work. So, but when you're having a negative experience, when you have so many other people saying, no, you're misunderstanding them, it's really good. And we all love it. And we love taking care of our hybrid children and all that. Finding someone else to work with you and say, does this work for you? You can't find them. So that's why I wrote the book, partly, is to say, if you're having this experience and you're not happy about it, here are some tools. And I tried to be as thorough as possible. I might have been a little redundant in my outline, but I wanted people to spark people's imagination and say, this is a stepping off point. You can take this as far as you want. It's your own mind. So
is there, where is it? I don't remember if it was in the book or not, but where can people get instructions if they wanted to try the green spiral staircase self-hypnosis device, I guess?
It's in my book.
It is in your book.
Okay. Yes. And also Stuart Swerdlow has a book called The Hyperspace Helper, and it's in there. He has a lot of other exercises to do. And you probably should go through all of them. It's just that I didn't, for purposes of my book, I just wanted to put that in there. Then they can, when they get that book, they can, do all the other exercises and go as far as they want. I just wanted to give them a stepping off point.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll link to his book as well, because I think that it would make sense for people interested in this topic to get both.
Yeah, and actually there's a third book. It's Healing Symbols and Archetypes. And that's also in my book. Link to both books. I think it's best to get both.
Cool, yeah.
When you visualize it, it's better.
Yeah. I like the idea of having a sort of intact discourse, so I'll probably read those other two as well.
Okay.
Ever since I started the subject on the podcast, my bookshelf for this subject just keeps expanding, because it's sort of a rabbit hole. Once you read one person's book, it goes into the next one that might go into three more.
Absolutely. That's true. And actually my husband's like, do you need all of these books? And I don't know if I need them. I mean, maybe I want to reread some of these things. Maybe, things in my life have changed so much that I want to revisit it and see what else I missed, because that's one of the things, when this is happening to you, there's so many more questions than answers. And as you have experience, unfortunately or fortunately, you then can look back and say, oh, that's what that meant. Oh, that's what that meant, because otherwise, it's just a bunch of noise. So it's good to have other people's viewpoints of their situations and also their description, which can say to you, oh my gosh, that's what's happening to me.
Do you have people that reach out to you and like where they didn't know that this was happening to other people, or maybe they didn't feel like there were other authors talking about this that they could reach out to?
Yes, I do. I have gotten quite a few people contacting me and saying, I've had really weird experiences all my life, and I didn't even know what was going on. And can you direct me to different groups and, that kind of thing. A lot of them see me on the podcast, though, and then contact me also.
Yeah. How active has the Facebook group been for you?
It's been somewhat active. I have moments when I feel like I have a good question, and so I'll ask a question. Now, initially, I was kind of annoyed that I couldn't get anyone to answer questions, but this is a really weird subject. And I think that a lot of people don't want to say, exactly what's happening to them. And I can understand why now, especially now, after everything I wrote down was turned against me. So in that book. So because of that, I can understand why people don't want to write down exactly what's happening to them, because then they'll know and they'll block it. If it's good, they'll block it. So now I just ask questions, and I just want to stretch people's minds. And sometimes I'll put in what's happening to me at that time. So I know that I was recently talking about my computer. My computer was compromised early on in 2017, I believe, or 2016. And what was happening, and how, whoever it is has access to all my financials, all of my passwords, so they could impersonate me. And I was trying to understand if anyone else had that, what would be the purpose of an ET wanting to have access to that? And it was interesting, so it's good to get other people's viewpoints on that. And, and then other times I just ask questions that I've wondered myself, and other people occasionally will post other things. I'll get one guy that will answer all the questions, and then he'll leave or he'll stay and won't be as active. And then another person will show up and be more active. So I don't know. It's sometimes active, sometimes not.
Do you ever feel like when you're doing something like a podcast or something like that, that strange things will happen before or after you start speaking publicly about it? Like right now, for example.
Yes, actually, when I first started doing all of the podcasts, I mean, my phone would always ring. I'd get spam calls. Things would fall off shelves. Equipment would not work. There would always be sound problems, on and on and on. I mean, there's so many things. And sometimes there would be like anger from the ETs when I have the nerve to speak out about them. And so, yeah, sometimes I get a few more bruises for them to show their displeasure. So, yes.
Yeah, I have noticed that ever since I opened up this show to the topic, that strange things do happen. Like when I first introduced it, I reached out to a whole bunch of different people, including Terry, simultaneously. Like I would just knock off different emails, inviting everybody, and within an hour, everybody I invited accepted the invitation, which is like really unheard of.
Really?
Like maybe for every 15 invites, I'll get a yes, maybe a maybe. A maybe is also a good thing too, but most of the time I never hear back. But with this subject, everybody not only said yes, they said yes within an hour. And that evening, this was last year, and that evening I went for a walk, and there were so many strange lights in the sky that I'm just like, oh, I think the universe is very interested in my interest in this.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories like that too, where actually Terry's a great one. He talks about how the moment he started writing the book or thinking about writing the book, they sort of sat him down. And they're like, you shouldn't do this.
Wow, I wish they'd done that for me.
It's funny too, because he talks about how this whole experience, he wishes they would just sit him down in the living room and just have a conversation with him. And finally, when he decides to write a book, they do what he wanted. They sat him down in his living room and had a conversation with him. And it's
Wow.
just like, wow, when they really want something for you, I guess they can be nice. But
Yeah.
he wrote his book anyway, which I'm glad he did.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I found, because they're like narcissists, that there's something in it for them. Right. And that's why they're allowing it. It's not because they have goodness in their heart. It's because they feel like it's a benefit, or maybe you'll write about something that they want you to write about, because it's a form of control.
Yeah. I think that's the key too, to really not only understanding it, but eventually stopping it altogether. What is it that they're getting? It's sort of like if the chicken found out we were taking its eggs, you know,
Yeah.
what then the chicken would just have to figure out how to keep us from doing that. And
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing. 'Cause that's what it feels like. It feels like we're like this whole planet is just some sort of ranch that they're just taking something, but we don't know what it is they're taking.
Right.
And we know it's rooted in fear, and we know it's rooted in some way or another reproduction.
Right. Exactly. And so it's, it benefits them in some way, but it benefits them that we're in the dark, right?
Yeah.
If we knew, we might do something about it. If we knew exactly what was happening, what would we do with that information? It wouldn't be good for them.
Yeah.
So that's why they keep us in the dark.
Knowledge is power.
Yes, it is. Knowledge is power.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here and just talking a little bit about your book. If you is there something that is there anything else you would like to discuss? We got through all my bullet points about it. I'm going to hold it up to the big camera here so people can see what it looks like. It's called Abducted and Furious. It's a pretty good book. And oh, you know what? I really love how you keep sort of a catalog of just your the experiences you notice. So you just have these dates, and you just kind of keep a log, like a journal. I woke up to this, or I dreamed this, or I do the same thing.
Do you?
I do. It's right here. I don't have them that frequently, but I do have a journal here where if there's something truly odd, I'll write it down, and it's a specific book, and I keep it kind of tucked away so nobody who's visiting me can see it.
Yeah.
When did you start doing this sort of type of journaling or logging?
Well, when I started having first, when I was, well, I'm older than you, I'm sure. So anyone over the age of 40 can't remember everything anymore. So if you're over 40, you know that. If you're under and you're thinking, no, my mind's a steel drum. So it's partially for keeping, the information straight, the information that I get. And then I would just have these especially strange dreams. I would want to remember it all. And sometimes I'd actually feel the need to draw it, which I thought was strange because I have no artistic ability at all. And so I just started thinking, I got to write this stuff down because this is so strange. I'll never remember every detail of it. And so I just started writing it down every day, what happened. And that way I felt like also I could have kind of like a tapestry of strange things so that eventually I would have more puzzle pieces. Like, if you're doing a puzzle and you get all the corners or all the edges, then you can fill in the middle. But before that, you don't know what you're looking at, So I just needed a way to kind of categorize all the things that were happening to me and then see if it meant anything later, or when I look back, would it mean anything then? And it just seemed to me to be the right thing to do. And since I would wake up at like 4 a.m. every day, and I would remember my dreams, I would write it down, write everything down that I could remember. Or if I felt like I had an epiphany, I'd write that down. So it started like that, and it just went on for a long time like that. I don't do it so much anymore because whatever I do remember, the ETs turn that against me. Now they read what I wrote and then they use it against me later. So I don't do that so much anymore. So whatever helps me gets turned against me. So, but I recommend that everybody else do it because it's important.
What's an example of how they would use it against you?
Let's see. Okay. Well, I thought they were in my passwords. So I have a password manager and I sync my password on my computer and on my phone. I thought, they're on my phone, they're on my computer. I'm going to get a new password manager. So I wrote down the new password and I wrote it down and put it in a Rolodex. And I don't know why I didn't think they would find that, but they did. And they changed the password on the new, and they stole the Rolodex card. So, so that's what I mean. So everything is like that. So anything that could benefit you, if you're listening to music to cheer yourself up, then they play it in your head all the time. Until you're sick of it, but only like a clip. Like I used to do country dancing, and there was a song called "Loving You Is Fun," and they just use that part over and over. Loving you is fun. So as if I'm getting so much enjoyment out of this loving you, kind of like, an asshole thing. So those are the kinds of things. They're sadistic. They're, they just want to make sure that, and they also want to isolate you. So what they do is they make sure that everyone feels like there's something weird about you. And of course, you don't want to talk about your ET experiences now. So your circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's just a horrible existence. I think it's worth it to write the book, but the aftermath is just really hard.
Yeah. Well, that sort of last part is sort of why I give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And because I have no reason not to believe anyone. Like, what people experience is what they experience. And I do think it's like you said, you're collecting these puzzle pieces. I think everybody's experience too is just a collection of puzzle pieces. And if we can get enough of them, we can sort of figure out what the end game is and how to deal with it.
Right.
But I think we're a long way off.
We are. And I actually think that's by design, because if we were closer, then they would be threatened, and they don't want to be threatened. Yeah. Right.
Right. And
they don't want to feel that loss of control. So I think that's part of the problem. But, since I should just talk to more podcasters, because I didn't realize there were so many similarities. Or, like Dr. David Jacobs was saying that he started hearing the same story over and over. Once you get rid of all the nitty gritty details, there are some, aspects or structural aspects of the situation that are identical. And so I didn't know that the Air Force was such a force in, ETs, but it makes sense, right? For instance, people would ask me, well, when things happen to you, why doesn't your husband wake up? And it's like, I don't know. And that's common with every single abductee. The other person doesn't wake up. And I think it's because they've knocked us out. They knocked out that other guy too, whoever else was in the room. So it's not that unusual, but yet that's the common question is, why didn't your husband wake up when this was happening? And it's because they've done something to him, and that's common across the board. So it's good to talk to people and know that, these questions that I wonder myself are actually answered by other people having the same problem.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that Terry talks about in his book is because he was Air Force, I believe.
Yes,
and
he
he
was.
had an OSI investigation. He was the subject of an OSI investigation, and he implies that they may have known that he was headed out there and that what would happen.
Right.
And that's an interesting I don't know that he straight out said it, but that was definitely the implication.
Yeah, I agree with that. And actually, it's interesting. So I lived in California for 30 years and decided to move. But I always felt like I should move to Arizona. And I caution people now in my group, don't do it, because I think it's part of their plan, you know? It's like because in my Zero group that I'm in, people go, oh, I feel the call to go and move to a certain area, or I feel drawn to, this state or that state. But I think it's because they know what's going to happen to you. It's to their benefit, right? That this happens to you. So I was drawn to Arizona and I moved here, and I don't regret moving to Arizona, but I didn't expect all these things to happen to me once I moved here. And that's exactly what happened. Did they know? Were they drawing me here so they could enjoy the fruits of their labors? And, I don't know.
Hard to say. Have you ever read any of the research done by Bud Hopkins or John Mack?
Not John Mack. I am going to get some of his books. I have read some Bud Hopkins. When I did read it initially, when I was in my 20s, I was really scared. So I couldn't finish his book, but I did read Deb Covell's book, who was Kathy Davis, I think, in Bud Hopkins' books. So I did read her book, and we had a lot of similarities. In fact, in the Zero group, it was kind of interesting. Everybody in their 30s had some sort of was diagnosed with pre-diabetes. Yeah. And a lot of people had eye surgeries in their 30s, and I did too. So I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes in my 30s, and everybody else was too. And also I had cataract surgery in my 30s. Now, the funny thing is I had, severe myopia growing up, and then somehow suddenly had congenital cataracts. They just appeared. And my ophthalmologist said, it's congenital cataracts. And I said, have you seen it? Or I probably didn't say this, but I was thinking, did he see it before? But he said they just appeared. So that's why I had to have cataract surgery at the age of 32. And so Deb also had, I think, cataract surgery in her 30s, and other people did too. So, there are so many similarities and a lot of issues with our bodies. It is really scary. And here's an interesting thing. So I came here to Arizona in 2011. 2012, I started having vitreous detachment in both eyes and had to have another surgery. And that's when I got my eye implant that I can see. And I found that that's a surveillance system.
So they're tuning into our podcast right now.
I know they are. They're probably behind me.
Yeah. I know. I'm waiting. Well, because you got your closet cracked, I'm waiting to see like a finger like wrap around and
that's for my cat to go in. To go in and sleep on the other
That makes
side.
sense. Yeah. Oh, it's just a cat.
I think it's so fascinating that I wish I had some hard evidence like Terry, because I don't have anything like that. I mean, he was one of the lucky ones, actually, even though he doesn't feel lucky, none of us do, but to have actually a thing in his leg, and an x-ray of it, because a lot of us don't have that.
Yeah, and I actually included the x-ray in the YouTube version of his episode because it is important. But at the same time, as a storyteller, I believe in the power of story, and I'm an advocate for people telling their stories and just brave the stigma and tell your story, which you've done. And I appreciate that, because down the road, your story, Terry's story, everyone else's stories all the stories Bud Hopkins cobbled together, and John Mack and all them. It's all going to make sense down the road. It's just a matter of keeping those logs and telling people what you're experiencing. And I appreciate that you've done that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to tell people that there is a stigma, and it is hard for us afterwards, but we're doing this for humanity because if nobody speaks out and we're all silent and scared, does that help anyone? It doesn't. So I think it's important, and that's why I decided to write my book too, was because this is happening to people. And if nobody's talking about it, then nobody can help each other. So I'm so glad I met Terry, and and he encouraged me to write my book. And it's hard writing a book. I mean, it's weird. I mean, you write books, right?
Oh yeah, it takes me years.
It was your first book to write and to do everything.
Yeah, well, I do, and even today I still do everything because I'm a stickler for graphic design. So I do all my page layout.
Oh wow!
All my illustrations, my cover design, and because I think in terms of layers, I tend to go down rabbit holes for subject matters. So it takes me years. Like the one I'm dropping in October, I started in 2016 because when I start on one subject, I go down that rabbit hole. Again, It's all goes to free will. So what is free will? What does that mean if somebody can snap their fingers and suddenly the free will of their opponent is paused? That's a horror story to me. And so I'm unpacking that at the deepest levels. And it's the same thing with this. I'm trying to develop a monster movie because I make movies as well. Wow. So I'm exploring what a monster is from a social standpoint in addition to just having a monster.
Right.
There's this one moment where this old lady's flipping through an old tube television. We talked about a CRT monitor earlier. Yeah. I'm like, I know what you're talking about. She's just flipping through a tube television, and everything on TV is related to monsters in some way. So the game show that she passes through, Monsters of History, and they'll talk about Adolf Hitler or whatever, or Alexander the Great. And then it'll go to a Maury Povich type talk show where the subject is, my child is a little monster. He keeps trying to start fires. What is a monster? And so this is why it takes me years to create anything.
Well, I mean, I think it's really, really good that you're a creator then, because you know what goes into creating. But also, I think hats off to Amazon for allowing self-publishing, because that's what I was able to do. And even though I didn't quite know what to do, and I had a great editor named George, who helped me so much. I got him from Terry Lovelace. He actually did the design of the cover, and he helped me with every single step of the way. I mean, I couldn't have done it without him. He was so great. So, but the self-publishing is so much better because you don't have to shop your book to a publisher to beg them to publish it. Everything is unfortunately up to you, but with the marketing and all of that, but so many more stories can get out because there isn't that barrier of publishers.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things that I keep meaning to break up on podcasts that tackle this subject is almost all, not all of them, but almost all of the books that tackle this are either independently published through a small press or they're self-published by the author. Right. And I think that is telling of just how the current publishing industry isn't doing a service to the public. We really are literally on our own getting these stories out there.
We are. And, putting them on Amazon or wherever, and marketing and, all of that. I mean, and learning how to, be on a podcast. I mean, it's a huge learning curve. I've learned a lot. I'm very grateful for everyone who has me on their show, because it's a little bit more experience, So thank you for allowing me on your show.
Absolutely. Well, as long as I'm independent, I will definitely have you're welcome back anytime. And I say as long as I'm independent because I do know that there's this interesting story that that there's an actor, Dan Aykroyd. Do you know who he is? The
Yeah,
actor Dan Aykroyd
yeah.
talks about how he was supposed to do a TV show about ETs and the UFO phenomenon, and it was on a major network. And like the day they were doing their first episode, they were mysteriously shut down, and he was outside on a break, and he had like a weird Men in Black sighting. And I just feel like if that had been more of an independent thing, they would have never been able to be shut down.
Right.
And so I think it's important that actually we stay independent on this subject matter.
I agree. I mean, I remember seeing something either on Facebook or Reddit saying, that Mr. Rogers, do you remember him? Had a show and he was, pretty active. I guess he put his feet in water in a little pool and he invited the policeman, who was black, to put his feet in the pool because he knew that there was this huge social issue with sharing pools with black people. And I thought that was so brave of him to do that. And it's, he had to do it kind of in a sneaky way, which I thought was great. But, I mean, it's great to have independence too, because, think of all the things he wanted to do, but he was not allowed to do.
Yeah, I actually remember seeing that in a documentary about him. And there's also another example where you remember there's an actress that died recently who had the first interracial kiss on Star Trek. Captain Kirk and
Oh, yeah.
Lahore.
Michelle,
Yeah, yeah.
Michelle,
She died like last week, and
yeah,
at least at the time that we're recording the episode,
right.
it'll have been a month or so if you're hearing it now. But um, he kept the studio or the television production company didn't want to deal with the controversy of it, so they kept trying to change it, and William Shatner kept screwing up all the takes whenever they tried to change it to ensure that the only usable take was the kiss. And I love that.
That is great. Yeah, me too. We need more rebels who are fighting society, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's what you are, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'm trying my best, and you do what you can.
Yeah. Well, I gotta log off now. But I really appreciate this. I think this was a good conversation for the listeners. And if you ever want to come on again for any reason whatsoever, just feel free to reach out to me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I did have a fun time. And I love all of you interviewers are such fun people that I always want to be friends afterwards because you're open to my story. And also, you always have your own stories, right? I mean, otherwise, you wouldn't have the thought to have this on your show.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm open to it just because, like, one, I've seen strange lights in the sky, and I'm in aviation. Like, I'm obsessed with aviation. I know how to look at aircraft at night, and I've seen some weird shit that is not us. But also, like, yesterday I was on Jim Harold's Campfire. Do you know that podcast?
No.
Where people just kind of call in and tell their stories. And I called into Jim Harold's Campfire to talk about my mother's precognitive dreams and premonitions because her whole life she's had premonitions and precognitive dreams, and I just find I find it all fascinating, and I'm pretty sure that we're not seeing reality as it truly is. And so a lot of my interest in it is kind of trying to find some level of truth that we're not seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. Actually, I think that there is so many things that we can't see that we would not be what's the word? I mean, we would be shocked at the truth of our situation. And I was watching, what was it, Lou Elizondo. So he was saying he thinks the American people or any people would feel very somber about what the truth is. And it's because whatever this illusion is that we think we're in is not the truth. And so it's just interesting if anything actually comes out, because I'm skeptical now, but it would be nice to know the truth as opposed to the illusion, because that's what we're seeing. And I think that, all of us are breaking out of the illusion and saying, this is happening to me and it's not normal. And you guys are all so busy with your lives, working your crazy hours and getting food on the table, that you can't see it.